Today I want to speak to you more about dreams, specifically about the two levels of dreams. There's the first level, which we experience in our everyday dreams, in our normal concerns about life. So you dream about perhaps your family, your work, and your friends, and and so on. These are the most popular, or the easiest to access level of dream, and this is what could be called the personal unconscious. And here, the whole this level of the dream, the first level of the dream, is where we get to learn to. The concern is actually to establish a relationship with the soul, with the deeper level of our unconscious, the deeper level of the dreams. So the first level of the dreams, the personal unconscious, is where we the whole dreams really reflect their relationship, our relationship to the soul, or the lack of it. In other words, if we still live on the level of our personal, our survival instincts, if you like, our hoarding, sex, production of children, power, and some fun, as Joseph Campbell would have said, then our dreams will be reflecting that level of our consciousness in our dreams. Now, when we have managed to establish a deeper relationship to the soul, to the spirit, to that deeper level of our mind, the symbolic mind, on the collective unconscious, then the dreams change. They become more archetypal, or rather, they become more mythological, more pagan in nature, where nature is divine. Now, how do we get to that level of dreams? Well, there are many ways, and there is these days, the psychedelics, for instance, are very, very popular to reach that level. But there's no guarantee, even with psychedelics, there's no guarantee that you're gonna reach the archetypal level of the dream. I have seen some people and seen videos and films about people, taking, for instance, going all the way to South America, paying thousands of dollars, if not more, drinking this awful stuff called ayahuasca, and they really haven't gone beyond that threshold of culture, the duality of culture, to that deeper level of the archetypal. There's simply too much fear of dying, and there's too many things that are holding us back in this reality, in this everyday society. Oi, shush! And so the way to do it, for instance, the way I do it is I work with symbols, with mythological symbols. So what happens is that when your interest flows already there, the interest in the world, in the everyday life, wanes. It gets less and less and less until you reach that point of trance where you really have an out-of-body experience. So you have left the body and something else then happens. So for instance, in the legend of the Buddha, the way he did it, he was sitting under a tree, the Bodhi tree, and God Mara came to tempt Buddha. Now, he tempted him with fear, he tempted him with lust, and he tempted him with duty. But because his body was here in this visible dimension, but his mind, his consciousness has already left it. He's already been looking too deeply inward to be moved by anything outside in the culture, in society. So he was no longer, he didn't want anything from the world anymore, and he didn't fear death. In that moment, when he overcame the demon Mara, his eye opened, his inner eye opened, and he went out of his body, he left his body, dropped his body, and went to that deeper archetypal or symbolic mind dimension. dimension. And there he had his initiation into his own life beyond lives and interconnectedness of all of existence. Jesus exactly the same when he went to the desert, and he was tempted by his own demon of power, demon of economy, and demon of politics. I remember there were three of political power. So, and of spiritual inflation, should I say. So, and at that moment, we don't know what Jesus's vision was. We are not told, but it was after he returned from the desert that he started his career in teaching. So, for instance, the way I do it is I work with symbols, because the mythological symbol comes from the soul. It speaks back to it. In other words, the symbol becomes the door through which you slip through to the other side, to where it comes from. It becomes a sign to where you're going, to the most inward center. And I will there are two levels of dreams. There's your personal, where you're trying to establish this connection to the soul by, sublimating the feminine instinct, or should we say the libido. So it does not, you don't project it anymore outside of yourself, onto people, onto things, onto politics, or anything. There's nothing in the world that actually has your attention. You don't find any meaning in there. And then you don't care whether you live or die. Then something happens, the out-of-body experience. So the energy is pushed inward. And then when it's pushed inward and you have overcome its need for survival, something else happens. So I will tell you one of my own experiences. This has happened many, many years ago, of that deeper dream experience, going beyond the personal to the collective. And it happened like this. I was working with symbols, mythological symbols, for quite a long time. I don't remember, it was days or weeks. In any event, there I was, I'm working with them until one night I have this dream. I wake up in the middle of the night in the dream, and my room is dark. But I see that the furthest wall away from the front door, from the door, it seems to be dissolving. So I walk towards that wall, which in fact has dissolved now, and it's become thick fog, mist, really white mist. So I step into this mist, and the more I walk into this mist, into this deep fog, the brighter it becomes. It comes to a point where I can't really see anything because my eyes haven't adjusted to the light. And in that moment, when I stepped through the fog, the light, it's bright daylight, and my eyes haven't adjusted, and I'm struggling to keep them open. And I noticed that right there at that threshold where the where the fog has entered, where I have come through from the personal to that deeper dimension, there is my guide already waiting for me. And it was a feminine figure, like she always was in the dimensional dreams for me. She's wearing a long white gown. She's got long flowing hair. She takes my hand. I'm still blinded, mind you, in this bright sunlight. Takes my hand and she says, "Come and I will show you something." Before I manage to reply or say anything, she grabs me and walks on, and I have to follow. And I see that we are walking on grass. This is a warm day somewhere in a rural landscape, which I don't really recognize. And I look at the ground where we're walking, and it's a small dirt path. And I know that I've seen this path before, and in that moment of revelation, I realized that it's the path I have walked this way so many times. That's why there is a tiny path, and we were walking, it felt like we were walking up a hill. And once in that moment of revelation that it was me walking this way before, we are at that moment we are standing in front of a huge mountain. And there is a door, there's an entrance to the mountain, to a cave. and she's still holding on. My guide is still holding to my hand, and we enter into the cave. And there are 2 or 3 steps, rock steps, which we had to walk down into a corridor. And then we enter this long winding corridor, and the further we walk in, the darker it gets, until my guide and I enter into a huge area, an open area, like a room, like a separate room. It was as large as a 2-story house. And there I see, right in the middle of this huge cave opening, this huge cave, growing an enormous tree, old, ancient. I couldn't tell you how old it was, but it was enormous, and it was flowering. The tree had lots of flowers. It was flowering. And I looked up into where the tree was ending, and it was not ending at the cave's ceiling, because the ceiling was actually open. It kept on going to the sky, to the blue sky that I saw. And then I looked down onto the trunk, and this enormous trunk, it was meters wide, and we're at the point where the trunk, the single trunk, went into many branches. They grew a lily, enormous white lily with a long golden stem coming out of it. At that moment, when I'm still admiring the tree, my guide has let go of my hand. She walks over to the tree and stands walks in bare feet into a creek, a little spring that is bubbling up from the roots of the tree. There she takes a cup, fills the cup with the water from the bubbling stream, hands it to me, and she says, "Drink, for this is where many men of old found their gold." See, she's talking poetry on that deeper level of the collective unconscious, of our symbolic mind, the level which is common to all of humanity. It is poetry, it is symbols. The tree from which I was drinking, it is the same tree from which in ancient Egypt the goddess, it is the same goddess that just gave me the cup. It's the goddess that gave the water to drink to the souls of the dead, to rejuvenate them, to give them own initiation into the immortality, into the interconnectedness of life. This was the same water of life that we find in many of the holy springs in Europe. Chartres is built on one of these holy springs. The cathedral in France, and many other temples which were previously pagan temples and worshipped the water. For instance, coming out of the caves and coming out of fissures in the rocks. Now, we have Catholic churches built on them. So this is the same water, the water of life that in Mesopotamia the goddess gave to people, to whoever wanted to drink and know the mysteries of light, the unity of our life. So is the tree. You see, it's the same tree under which Buddha sat until he reached his own enlightenment of the same thing, where many men drank and found their gold. The gold means the spirit, your own immortal power, your own divinity, which happens to you when you are intuitive, when you write poetry especially. Because remember, she spoke in poetry to me. And it's the same tree upon which Jesus was crucified. He climbed up that tree to have his own revelation of oneness with God. Right? It's the same tree in Norse mythology, the Yggdrasil, which connects the heaven and earth and the underworld. It's the same tree in Germanic tradition, the Inminsul. You find that in Greek culture, you find it in the East, and you find it in the West. So it's the same tree. That's why she says it is where many men of old found their gold. I've gone to that dimension of a psyche which we all share, where many have come, you know, it might not be exactly the same experience as I had at that moment, but it's exactly the same spot that right at this very moment lives deep within you as well, and you have access to it. You can experience that, but it is on the deeper level of the dream, not the personal stuff where you're just learning to have the right relationship to your spirit, to the soul, to the libido, you know, which needs to be brought back inward so you don't run around projecting. And then you have this out of body experience, and then you have the archetypal dreams, you know, you slip out as consciousness, and the guide waits right at that threshold, at that point where this world ends and the other, or the one that we don't see, the invisible, begins, you know, where the phenomenal ends and the numinous begins. The guide always waits at that point, and that'll be evident in your dreams. So you have the two levels, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal is the learning how to have the right relationship to your guide. You know, the guide the spirit has to be brought inward, and then it becomes your guide to the deeper dimension, the most inward center, the deepest part of the cave, the ground of being from which water of life comes, and water of life goes back to from which you come and to which you go back. And that, in fact, is the process of our dying. We have lots of, resources now and proof now. Dr. Peter Fenwick's work is full of, he's done it for decades now, and has collected the information of the people that are dying in hospice and so on. And this is exactly what happens when one of the first things he will tell you is you have to let go of everything. This is what amounts to good process of dying. If you have grudges against someone, you got to let go of that. If you have wealth that you have stashed up, you've got to let go of that. That's the finding the right relationship to the spirit, to the consciousness that you really are. And then something happens, and in the process of dying that, for instance, Dr. Peter Fenwick has found, then you start to have visitors at your bedside, coming from the other side and so on. You might have a forewarning dream when you're going to die, and then they come, they take you, and you have this revelation of the beyond duality, going into a oneness, the unity of all life, the deeper dimension of the dream. So you have your personal everyday dreams, which most people just dream, and you have that other, the deeper, the out of body, where we go to when we are actually dying. So that's why it's called to die before you die.